So a really funny story came up today, and that how the Roald Dahl's family are going to actually sort of revamp a lot of Roald Dahl's original novels, in which they're going to actually remove a lot of references to people's weight, size, and appearance. The idea is this is going to appeal to a modern audience. I'd say this is about as backwards a suggestion as you could possibly take for a more modern audience, because in my personal opinion, there is nobody else who has a bigger disdain, distaste, and burning hatred for modern audiences than the people who come up with these ideas. And they're pretty simple to explain, but I'll just go over them anyway. Okay, so first of all, what's going to happen when people come, like kids come to read these stories for the first time, and there's absolutely no way physically or in any kid's imagination you can actually distinguish one character from another. What happens if they, because it will literally read like this: the very next day the first golden ticket was found. It was won by a boy called Augustus Stoop. And then it just basically ends there, and it just cuts to that sequence where more and more people are just going to go and buy Wonka bars. That's exactly what it's going to read like, ladies and gentlemen, because, again, if there's no defining characteristics, if there's nothing to distinguish one character from another, if there's nothing, sort of like the very basics, really, when it comes to writing characters or writing stories, when you remove that element from the foundation, when you try and like reverse thousands of years of literature, when you start doing that, ladies and gentlemen, you start losing out immediately. Because, and here's a very interesting thing to point out, ladies and gentlemen. I don't quite remember when Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was first published. I think it was about 1957. I think. Actually, I'll tell you what. I'll just take a look right now. Factory book. 1964. So it's nearly as old as my mother. That's pretty interesting. So yeah, you have to also understand as well, not only, again, the standard was very different from in 1964 than compared to when it is in 2023, but you also got to remember the standard for children's books and children's entertainment media as well, all of that. Remember, this is not 1964 anymore. This is 2023. Things have changed. I'm not saying they've got better, but they have certainly changed. Remember, back in 1964, many of the things you could just get were in book form. Sure, we had movies like The Jungle Book and stuff like that came out in either 63 or at some point during the 1960s anyway. It was the last movie when Roald Dahl was still alive. But then, of course, again, even taking the idea of like films for example, you know what, in both the 71 Gene Wilder adaptation and the Johnny Depp reimagining, you still had Augustus Gloop in both films still as he was presented in the book. That's just sort of how it was, ladies and gentlemen. And it wasn't, neither one of those books was straight up going out of their way to start saying to anyone else, discriminate against people who are overweight. What the books and the movies were actively saying is that if you are greedy, then you won't be going any far. And that's the point, ladies and gentlemen, because some people will immediately look towards the Roald Dahl's family and they'll start saying that they only have done this for greed, and they'll only start saying that just to make this for a modern audience, we've got to revise it and release it again. But then the next question follows is that if this is a malicious attempt at censorship, and what I mean by malicious, ladies and gentlemen, is that, well, what's going to happen? Are they going to start recalling every single copy that has ever existed since for the last 59 years, so that nobody else will be able to buy a copy that references everything from the original text? You know, Newspeak was a thing in 1984 that predicted stuff like this. Soon, there's not going to be one reference or one word in it when they record all of his books that are actively going to, say anything about anyone. I mean, what's going to happen when they come to describe Charlie Bucket? They describe him as thin as a skeleton. Oh, hang on a minute. Is it okay that we describe him, in that sense? Because, he's meant to be our main character and he's the person we're meant to be ruling out for. And we can't do that for anybody who's, in the wrong, or anybody who displays, inaffectionate traits. Is that what we're getting at, ladies and gentlemen? Is the idea that, it's not fine in either case, but we have to emphasize it when it's something we have to, draw to. Because that's the thing you also have to take into consideration when they come to describe people who may be from poorer backgrounds. I mean, are they going to change that as well? What if they actually changed this aspect about Charlie, that he actually lived in a nice house and he was completely fine and healthy and he just wanted to get in that factory? I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but if I did that, I think it would literally spoil the entire point of the book. And when you get onto stuff like that, you immediately look to literally how they would handle every other book they're going to probably take back. What's going to happen with Fantastic Mr. Fox? Are they going to recall all of those by saying that we can't have any, anthropomorphized animals because that's barbaric and that's idiotic and there's no room for that whatsoever? Also, we can't portray parents as being, anything else than just meant to be all good, all knowing all the time and stuff like that. Or what happens when maybe something like the witches will be revisited? They'll literally just say we'll have wizards and witches in here as well, because they'll cry that it's sexist to have the bad characters in the book be women. Is that what it's going to come down to? You tell me, ladies and gentlemen, because the kid in the book, I don't quite remember what his name was, but remember, he does not turn back into a boy when all is said and when the book's over. He stays as a mouse, and him and his grandma are gonna go out of the way to try and exterminate all the witches left. That's really how the book ends, and it's very difficult for us to see, well, what do you really need to change about that? Things are never going to be the same again, but we can always look forward to. It's not exactly the happiest of endings to a book, but again, there's some prosperity in it. And again, what if you change that in the books for a modern audience? That, there's no such thing as hope or prosperity or those things you can't openly look into. Also, again, isn't that just the sort of thing that, you would actually teach kids in school to use, very descriptive adjectives and, proverbs and stuff like that, like fat or obese or large or grotesque? Again, forgetting all of those things is like negative attributes for 1 second. Let's just, the words on their own. Are we going to openly discourage people from, trying to be creative with their language? Language is the single most creative form of expression we have on earth, ladies and gentlemen, more than it is to art and more than it is even to music, because there's so many terms and words that you could use without having to invent even more terms and phrases and uses to describe some of these feelings. But again, it emphasizes the point. We're limiting the language means you're going to be limiting the expansion of imagination. And these and the kids as well, the future generations, some of them who will go on to be some of the greatest, selling authors of all time, is this going to be their introduction to the world of literature? Really? No, that's it's, for me, it's not going to work. And again, you have to also look to, it's probably a good thing that they're not asking me to rewrite any of these things, because I can tell you right here and now, imagine what would happen if they actually asked me to rewrite George's Marvelous Medicine. They would literally open the very first page of the book and they'll just see me right down there, it's called crack. Because God Almighty, it would be It would be a missed opportunity if I didn't. So yeah, that's basically all I'm gonna say about that. It's an idea that's going to be met with mass revulsion. It's one that's going to be met with, simple logical arguments and dissertations. And it's also one that's also going to be met with ideologies about you're limiting people's trail of thoughts. Again, even maybe comedians who be coming up and stuff like that through generation after generation. You want to sort of like bring a smile to their faces. You want to make them chuckle and laugh a little bit. Come on now, you know what I'm saying? In my opinion, ladies and gentlemen, I am not actually opening because by the time I start releasing my books, you will be very, very surprised about how much I will be anti this idea. My sense of humor is very much like, Ricky Gervais and stuff like that. But I'm not going to go out of my way, start saying that you should start talking about this, and this to every single person who is like this. No, that's not what I said. You can quote me on that as well. But time will tell, ladies and gentlemen. And if people are going to go out of their way long after I'm dead, and they're going to start saying that my book should be recalled and rewritten for a new audience, I will literally strike from the grave, tell them no, tell them it's never going to be like that, and then return to my slumber.